and welcome to Shelf Life. Thanks for joining us for another texty and arty half hour of storytelling.
Today we're going off the page with stories that look at writing for the stage and screen. We'll meet some talented storytellers who are breaking the mould, and at the other end of history, we'll look at a project that's preserving the work of the world's most famous playwright.
Coming up, Danish photographer Soren Salker welcomes us into his world. He's most well known for his iconic images of rock stars like Björk, The White Stripes, REM and U2, but recently worked on a project documenting 135 artists from around the world who all chose the street as their canvas.
But first, a story about one of the most famous books in the world, the first folio of William Shakespeare's plays. The collection includes some of the playwright's most famous works, The Tempest, Twelfth Night, Macbeth and Julius Caesar. Over the last few years, the University of Oxford's Bodleian Library has been working to preserve the folio for future generations. And Shelf Life spoke to the library's curator Pip Wilcox when she was visiting Australia to talk about the preservation project and the folio's fascinating history.
Shakespeare's first folio is the first collected edition of his plays. It was published in 1623, so 7 years after his death, by two friends of his and a consortium of printers and publishers in London. It contains 36 plays. 18 of them had been published before, and 18 were published for the first time in the first folio, and it's thought that had they not been published, we wouldn't have them at all in any form. The copy that the Bodleian Library has came to the Bodleian Library in 1623, so the year it was published, and it was a hugely popular book while it was in the library. It was very well read, and it went missing from the library at some point in the next 80 or 100 years. We're not entirely sure how, for a couple of theories. It would have been sold, it certainly wasn't stolen. And in 1905, an undergraduate at the university brought an old book in from his library at home, and he wanted advice on whether it was the first or the second folio of Shakespeare's plays. He took it into the Bodleian Library, where there were many experts on older books, to ask their advice. And the librarian on duty recognised it as the book that had belonged to the library, that came to the library in 1623. When we were comparing this copy of the first folio to the other copy that's at the Bodleian Library, we found an apple pip squashed into the margin of the book, and some rather dubious stains around it. I think someone was eating an apple over it. You can see what the readers wanted to read the most when it was on shelf in the library, and they're the rude bits from Romeo and Juliet, and the drunken scene in the second part of Henry IV, where Hal, Prince Hal, later to become Henry V, and Falstaff are drunkenly plotting an ambush on their friends. They're going to rob them the next day. Those are the things that appealed to readers in the 17th century, and I think they still speak to us today. It's in such a fragile condition, not because it's ever been badly treated, but because it's been so loved, it's been read to tatters. And because of that, it isn't in a condition which it can be given to readers in the library. And it seemed to me an ideal candidate for digitisation. It's the only first folio that's demonstrably still in its first cover, so that the cover that it was given in 1623-24. Unfortunately, to digitise it would also damage it, even with our hugely expert imaging services department at the library. So it needed to be either conserved or stabilised first. So instead, what my colleagues in conservation did was stabilise the book to a condition where digitising it wouldn't damage it. And having digitised it, thanks to the generosity of the public, who gave over £20,000 in 2012, we were able to digitise it and put it online, where it's freely available to anyone in the world to read, to download, to make iPad covers with. So we have two websites associated with this project, and one of them was the fundraising website. It's still available, so you can read about the story of the project. And the second website, where you can consult the book, you can read it, turn the pages, digitally of course, and some very generous further donations on top of the public campaign have been given to us, and we've created an XML digital edition of the text. So now the first folio has been digitised and it's freely available online. We're also, of course, looking after the digital images, so anyone anywhere in the world will be able to access it forever now without damaging the physical book further.
I've had a very big interest in this kind of thing for many years. In my childhood, I was very interested in graffiti and breakdancing. So that was early 80s when it was happening for the first time in New York. And just from watching videos, that sort of totally changed my life at the time. I've just finished the first edition of the book. I've photographed, I think, 137 artists. It's from 13 different cities. There are about 15 Australians, and so it's quite a large proportion of. In comparison, I've photographed 3 Danish artists, and I live in Denmark. So, I think the Australian scene is probably the one that I have covered the best as a whole scene. Not many missing, at least, from like the main artists on the Australian scene. But there's always more coming up. That's the interesting thing too. Like suddenly you'll see a new kid who's doing amazing things. And so it's also an ongoing thing. But when I started this project, and very soon realized that, well, half these people won't even show me their face. So that was a big challenge. And actually, it's turned out to be great fun. I think it's just a fun game. For a lot of them, it's not really about, hiding because they stand in the street and paint and everybody can see who they are. But for some of them, there's a very legitimate reason for doing it. But other than that, I think it's just become more like a creative thing. You can play around with different ways of disguising yourself. It's actually insane to do this kind of project. Perseverance definitely is one of the biggest qualities you must have. I think as a starting point, you've got to have something to contribute. Like, if I hadn't done all the work that I'd done before, I don't know that I necessarily could have contributed anything to this family or community. But as I started to photograph more artists, I just found out that there was so many good ones out there. One thing I did was, whenever I had photographed a really good artist, I would ask them, can you tell me one artist who must be in this book if I want to do the ultimate collection of the scene as it is right now? Who would be important to include? And actually, that was a really good way of getting to new artists. And actually, also it was a good way of getting to artists that were really difficult to get to, because some of them I've had to spend a year or 2 getting to because they don't do this kind of thing. I've had commercial jobs all along, so I haven't given up my work to do this because it wouldn't work. Especially for the first 2 years, I just did it whenever I was somewhere. I would do this. It's hard work, and it's not an easy way if you want to make this your livelihood. But it's definitely one of the most adventurous and fun jobs as well. I feel there's a very strong sense of community within the street art community, especially, I think.
Welcome back to Shelf Life. My little boy just loves live theatre, and I can't wait to take him to see the 26-story Treehouse. It's the second Andy Griffiths book to be turned into a play, and we went along to the Casula Powerhouse Museum to check it out.
Well, I think arts and creativity is critical for anyone. It doesn't matter where you live. However, in the Western Sydney, which is one of the fastest growing areas in Australia, there has been historically a dearth of arts institutions. The expectation is that people go into the city. That can be very challenging. Transport is difficult, parking is difficult. It's a big day out. So for us here, we believe it's absolutely critical that people are able to access excellence in the arts and the best creative experience where they live, so that they can come here. It's easy. You jump on the train a stop or 2 or drive down, and they're able to see the same type of shows you'd see at the Sydney Opera House and the same quality of exhibitions they'd see at the Museum of Contemporary Art. We have a very large population of children and young people in southwest Sydney, and it's a very exciting population too. It's very diverse and kids are very engaged. And one of the things that we're very committed to is programming really high quality theatre and exhibition experiences for children and young people. I have a saying to my staff that, if adults want to see something that's a bit junk foody, let them. They're able to do that. But for kids, we don't give them junk food. We only give them the absolute best, because this is their opportunity to really see excellence and to have their lives and their creativity and imagination shaped by the arts. So 26-story Treehouse is a great example of a theatrical experience that the kids really get stuck into and engaged. It really stimulates them to think about their own imagination. They also have a lot of laughs. That's fantastic as well. And they they see what you can really do on a stage, how you can bring a stage to life with simple props, with humour, with a great script. And for us, that's wonderful. Kids come out of it absolutely stimulated.
See, Jill, I told you Hector Halfcup would make a great pirate, Captain.
I hate pirates.
Be quiet. Captain Woodenhead will hear you.
And you three will make lovely pirate slaves.
Slaves?
The idea of taking a book and then putting it on stage or putting it on film or sometimes, turning it into a musical experience is one that gets done a lot in the arts. Sometimes it works wonderfully, sometimes it fails abysmally. I think you need to have a mixture in your theatre or your film experiences. Kids really love Andy Griffith's work and it's really exciting for them to see it translated onto stage. I think that's a really valuable outcome, but you also don't want to have everything just adapted from a book. You want to have original playwriting or original screenwriting as well that creates new stories. So as long as you get the balance right, you get great outcomes. The thing I think is fabulous about something like 26 Tory Treehouse is kids who aren't big readers may come and see the play anyway because it's a different form of engaging and then go to the book. So you actually can go both ways. It's not just book to stage. Sometimes it goes stage to book as well. And that's another form of literacy that's really important for kids to be able to engage with.
Oh, look, I love seeing my books turned into plays because it's in fact the only way I can get outside the book and experience what other people are experiencing when they read the book. Because I've written the book, I've lived it, I know every joke, I know every sentence, I know everything I'd like to change. But when I see the play, other people have put their own creativity into it and it comes back at me. It's like it's someone else's story. And I'm sitting there, I'm often the one laughing the loudest in the theatre, which is quite embarrassing. But it's because everyone else has had a go and they're true to the spirit of it. Sometimes you change the events, but the madness particularly comes through, and theatre is a perfect vehicle for that.
If you haven't caught the performance yet, you can still see the 26-story treehouse until the end of 2015. Check your local listings for more information or visit our website for links. Now, before we head to a break, let's hear from some UWS students as they talk about contemporary approaches to storytelling. And if you have your own ideas, make sure you share them with us on our Twitter or Facebook page.
Photographs can attract people. There's different colors, there's different backgrounds and imagery and all that stuff. So I think it's the best way to tell someone's story is through a photograph, because it just, I don't know, to me a photograph is more appealing than a book because it makes me fall asleep.
Depends on the type of person you are. If you're a movie person, or if you're a person who enjoys plays, or if you're a person who enjoys books, I think it's more, it has to be catered to the individual.
I like plays. I'm very much a visual learner, but for me, plays is good. It's in motion. It tells a story right in front of you. It's live.
I reckon movies.
For me, photographs speak to me in a different way that any other medium would. I'm a book reader.
Movie.
I like to read books. I like in-depth, detailed stuff.
I like talking, so maybe just getting one-on-one and just, once upon a time, just getting back to the basics.
Movie, in a sense, if you make a documentary in such a way that we can raise awareness among people, it's going to be a good one.
At the moment, YouTube.
The cliche goes, the picture is worth 1,000 words.
Definitely a book. I'm very big on descriptive language and I love writing, so definitely a book. Yeah.
You're back with us on Shelf Life. Our next story has a little bit of everything. It's about an immersive experience that fuses cinema, theatre, music and sound design to create a full-throttle live cinema event. Live cinema is unlike anything you will have experienced before. Are you curious? Let's take a look now.
Live Cinema is a show where we take a film and we play that film on stage, and we play that film silently. Underneath that film we have a 7-piece band who perform a all-new score to the film live, and we have 4 actors and they lip sync all of the dialogue to the film live and play multiple characters. And we also have in a big glass box a lone sound effects artist, and he creates all of the sound effects that you see happening on screen. So in essence, we're creating an entire sort of all-encompassing soundscape live in front of the audience to accompany the film.
Mother.
The main thing about selecting a film, they have to be like rough diamonds, I suppose. So they have to have some great elements and be extraordinary in some way, but also fall short in other ways, because really the point of this is to try and sort of actually like improve upon the originals if possible. They tend to be movies that are shot on, you know, a really small budget over a really short shooting schedule with amateur actors or some amateur actors, you know. So they're kind of uneven. And both these, like, the two films that we're touring at the moment, Carnival of Souls and Dementia 13, they both have really strong visual aesthetics. The hardest part was trying to figure out how to do it, really, because I hadn't done anything like that. Nobody else in the company had done anything like this. So really just trying to figure out how to realize it, like how to do the timing, what do we do, how do we make the music fit, how do we make sure that the actors fit, how do we incorporate the different elements in a way that's not confusing, that like engaging without being overwhelming, because there's quite a lot going on stage, but we don't really want to necessarily distract the audience from the film. Ideally, the audience should be able to just watch the film and ignore us, but if they so choose, they can see what we're actually doing on stage, which is fascinating. But we don't want to be like competing, I suppose, with people's focus. So figuring out how to integrate all of those things, trying to figure out how much of a sort of live theatrical show it is and how much of a cinema show it is, what's the balance there. So we've toured these shows around New Zealand and Australia, we've been over to Europe. They've gone really well, been really well received. It seems like everybody who sees them really enjoys them, finds them sort of quite fascinating, but also really entertaining and exciting, which is great. So we've had excellent audience responses everywhere, even in places where they don't speak English as a first language, which is good.
One of the many, many reasons I love Facebook is because it's a lazy way for me to discover new things. I'm fortunate enough to have friends that constantly direct me to sites that, quite frankly, I'd never find myself. What I'm reviewing today is a podcast called The Writer and the Critic. It's a bi-monthly podcast hosted by Melbourne writers Kirsten McDermott and Ian Mond, two people with a passion for speculative fiction and an interest in social and cultural issues. I listened to my first ever episode a few weeks ago and now I'm totally hooked. If I continue to listen at the rate I have been, there's no way I'll keep up with the books they're actually talking about. But as I'm a fairly new fan of speculative fiction, I'm actually happy for now just to eavesdrop on their friendship and also get a feel for the genre that is new to me. The podcasts are long, often over an hour, but as it takes me that long to get to work and that long to drive back again, the length's perfect for my commute. The downside to listening while you're driving is that if they drop spoilers, there's no way to avoid them. But how would you avoid them anyway, I hear you ask? Well, the site has notes with time cues, so you can see the times they spend talking about a particular book, and if you want to avoid that section, you can. The hosts cover book and literary news, and then recommend a book to each other. The latest episode features Clade by James Bradley and The Well by Elizabeth Jolley, both of which I fully intend to read. Check it out.
So with our focus on writing that moves beyond the confines of the page, I want to share something a little different with you this week. It's a special issue of the Australian literary journal Overland, edited by Melbourne-based computer programmer and poet Benjamin Laird. Now, the first thing to notice about this collection, which Laird calls Electronic Overland, is that it's published online. Of course, this in itself isn't unusual. There are heaps of online journals dedicated to literary practice. But what's critical about the decision to publish this issue on the web is the way the writers use characteristics associated with the digital space to enhance the way readers experience the work. And the contributions in Electronic Overland are what might best be thought of as digitally born. They've been composed on a computer, and most importantly, they've been designed to be read on a computer. And as you'll no doubt find when you begin reading the pieces, there's a very deliberate layering of sensory experience, most typically found in sight, sound, touch, and gesture. Now, if you haven't experienced this kind of writing before, then this might all sound a little strange, if not abstract. So I thought the best thing to do would be to show you one of the standout pieces. And top billing for me is Pip Smith's poem Wayside Ranger, a highly creative word collage that brings together the voices of the 6 people Smith encountered at the Wayside Chapel. Smith's recorded, cut up and spliced those voices into a series of utterances and fragments that have gone on to form the basis of the poem. Now, to get at it, you need to open the poem by accessing the project-specific website via Overland. When you arrive, you'll be invited to read about the making of the poem here on the left, or you can enter it directly by clicking on the icon on the right. And once in, you can physically interact with it through a series of clicks that allow the piece to unfold in particular ways. Now, as Pip says, and you can see this in the way the text appears on the screen, the poem's been designed to expand as the reader digs through the various layers. And make sure you have your sound up, because included in those layers are the voices of the people themselves. They jostle in and around the words on the screen, creating this kind of verbal accompaniment to the poem and enhancing its atmospherics. It's a really exciting experience that takes full advantage of the online space in this way that's innovative and moving. Now, this is just one example. There are heaps of others that are worth looking at. If you're interested in electronic literature and in the way that the digital environment is shaping reading, I'd really recommend Electronic Overland for a fun and challenging experience.
The theme of this week's episode has been Off the Page, and once again, Shelf Life has put together a fantastic prize pack of books. For your chance to win, just visit the Shelf Life website and tell us in one short paragraph what your favourite storytelling platform is and why. Write your entry in the contact section and make sure you put Off the Page competition in the subject line. Good luck! Well, that's it from us. I hope you got lots of inspiration from this episode. If you missed anything or find yourself with a book-burning desire for another look, you can find tonight's episode on our website.
We'll be back at the same time with our resident dad joke and our children's theme program, when we'll look at the Indigenous Literacy Project and the Sydney Rises Festival Children's Program. We'll also talk to Australia's very own children's laureate, Jackie French.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.